How does a royal family with the most powerful weapons the world has ever seen, dragons the size of castles, fire that can melt armies, blood that traces back to old gods, manage to destroy itself so completely that almost no one is left standing? And how does a show about a war over a chair made of swords end up gutting you over and over, not with the battles but with the quiet moments in between? A father's last walk, a mother's impossible choice, a boy in a storm who just wanted to deliver a letter. Well, that's the cruel genius of House of the Dragon. It tells you right from the very first episode that the most dangerous battlefield in the entire world isn't a battlefield at all. And then it spends 2 seasons proving it, one heartbreak at a time. And that's right, today we're covering the saddest episodes of House of the Dragon.
What is it?
The deaths that silenced entire rooms of viewers, the single misunderstandings that doomed thousands, the moments where a show about fire and blood became very simply about loss. So pour yourself a cup of wine, and let's get into it. First, the setup, because the tragedy of House of the Dragon only lands if you understand the trap everyone is walking into. The show is a prequel to Game of Thrones, set roughly 200 years earlier, at the height of House Targaryen, the silver-haired dragon-riding dynasty that rules the Seven Kingdoms. At the center is King Viserys I Targaryen, played by Paddy Considine, and he's a genuinely good man, which in this world is almost a fatal flaw. Viserys doesn't want war. He doesn't want conflict. He wants peace and family, and to keep everyone he loves at the same table. And the entire show is in a sense about how that gentle wish gets ground into dust. Viserys has a daughter, Rhaenyra, who he names his heir, the first time a woman has ever been chosen to sit the Iron Throne. Rhaenyra is played as a young woman by Millie Alcock, and as an adult by Emma Darcy, and she is the show's protagonist, the person we follow through the whole tragedy. There's Daemon, Viserys' brother, played by Matt Smith, dangerous, charismatic, impulsive, the kind of man who solves problems with a sword and regrets it later, if at all. There's Alicent Hightower, played by Olivia Cooke, Rhaenyra's childhood best friend who becomes Viserys' second wife, and eventually the mother of the rival claimants to the throne. The friendship between Rhaenyra and Alicent, and how it curdles into a war that consumes 2 families, is the emotional spine of the entire series. And there's the prophecy, the song of ice and fire.
Need to get our head and get out.
A dream passed down from Aegon the Conqueror, secret knowledge that the Targaryens must remain united because one day a great darkness will come from the north and only a Targaryen on the Iron Throne can unite the realm against it. Viserys believes in it. He tells Rhaenyra about it. And, keep this in mind, almost no one else fully understands it. That gap in understanding is going to kill a lot of people. This is the story of the Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryen civil war that nearly ended the dynasty. As Princess Rhaenys says, there is no war so hateful to the gods as a war between kin, and no war so bloody as a war between dragons. The show is built to make you fall in love with this family and then watch them tear each other apart. Let's get into the episodes where it hurt the most. We start at the very beginning, Season 1, Episode 1, The Heirs of the Dragon, because the show announces its entire thesis with its first major death, and it's one of the most upsetting things in the whole series. King Viserys' wife is Queen Aemma Arryn, played by Sian Brooke. She's pregnant.
The childbed is our battlefield.
And Viserys is certain, desperate really, that this child will be the male heir he's wanted for years, after a string of miscarriages and stillbirths and only one living child, Rhaenyra. Aemma is exhausted by it. In a quiet, devastating early scene, she tells Viserys that if this pregnancy doesn't work, she can't try again. She can't bear to mourn another dead child. And she tells her daughter Rhaenyra a line that defines the entire series, that the childbed is a woman's battlefield. The men have their tournaments and their wars. This is hers. Viserys throws a grand tournament to celebrate the coming heir, and while the men joust and break lances out on the field, Aemma goes into labour, and it goes wrong. The baby is breech, turned the wrong way, and the Maesters tell Viserys that both mother and child will likely die.
There is a chance that we can save the child.
And then they offer him a choice that is really no choice at all. They can cut the baby out of her. It might save the child. It will kill Aemma. And there's no anesthesia, nothing to dull it. What follows is one of the most harrowing scenes the show ever produced. Viserys, panicked and grieving in advance, gives the order, and Aemma, who has no idea what's happening, who is begging, who never consented to this, is held down and cut open while she screams so that her husband can have his male heir. She bleeds to death on the table. The actress Cian Brooke lost her voice from screaming during the day and a half it took to film it. And here's the part that makes it unbearable. The baby, a boy named Balin, dies anyway, hours later. So Emma's death, her agony, the violation of her body, the stripping away of her choice in her final moments, all of it was for nothing.
Don't be scared.
Viserys lost his wife and his son in the same day, and the sacrifice brought him nothing at all. At the funeral, Rhaenyra watches her father, near catatonic with grief, and she says something to her uncle Daemon that lands like a stone. She wonders whether, in the few short hours her brother lived, her father was finally happy. She understands even as a child that the decade of pressure to produce a male heir is what killed her mother, and then she commands her dragon, Dracarys, and sets her mother and brother's funeral pyre ablaze. The show is telling you in episode 1 exactly what kind of story this is, a story where a woman's life is worth less than the concept of an heir, where the people in power make decisions about women's bodies in their own interest, and where the wheel of this whole bloody saga is set turning by a man who loved his wife and sacrificed her anyway. Viserys carries Aemma's death for the rest of his life. Years later, drunk and grieving, he admits to Alicent that his obsession with the dream of a son on the throne is what killed Aemma. It haunts him until the day he dies. Hold on to that.
I have decided to name a new heir. I'm your heir.
Now we jump to Season 1, Episode 6, The Princess and the Queen. And this is a death that shows you, more than almost any other, the terrible bond between a dragon and its rider. Years have passed. Daemon, Viserys' brother, has married Laena Velaryon, a warrior, a dragon rider, the rider of Vhagar, the oldest and largest dragon in the entire world. They've been living happily in Pentos across the sea, and they have 2 young daughters, and Laena is pregnant again, and the birth goes wrong, the same way Emma's did. The baby won't come, and Laena is bleeding, and she's dying. And Daemon is offered the exact same choice Viserys was offered in episode 1, save the wife or cut for the child. But Laena doesn't wait for a man to decide her fate. She has watched this story play out, she knows what's coming, and she refuses to die screaming on a birthing bed with a dead child inside her. So, in terrible pain, she drags herself up and out of the bed, and she stumbles out onto the grounds of the palace to where her dragon Vhagar is resting. And she stands before the largest, most powerful creature in the world, her dragon, her companion, and she gives a command. Dracarys. And Vhagar, who loves her, who has carried her for years, hesitates. The ancient dragon does not want to do it. Laena says it again, and again. Dracarys. Dracarys. And you can see the dragon understand, slowly, that its rider is in agony and is asking for release. And finally, terribly, Vhagar obeys and bathes Laena in fire, ending her suffering on her own terms. It's a death about agency, about a woman taking back the choice that Aemma never got. But it's also one of the most haunting images in the series because of what it says about dragons. That these monstrous weapons of war have something like love in them, and that the worst thing you can ask one to do is destroy the person it loves. Laena chose her death. She died a dragon rider, not a victim. But it broke her family, and it left Vhagar, the greatest dragon alive, without a rider, and a grieving, angry young boy is going to claim that dragon soon, and that will doom even more people. That same episode, by the way, ends with another quiet horror, the burning of Harwin Strong and his father in their castle, orchestrated by Harwin's own brother, the sinister Larys Strong, who delivers a chilling speech about the folly of having children even as he murders his own family to advance Alicent's father. Harwin was, by heavy implication, the true father of Rhaenyra's 3 sons, so Rhaenyra loses the man she loved in fire, while far away, and there's nothing she can do about it. The show keeps stacking these losses, quietly, building toward the war. Now we come to the episode that many consider the finest hour of Season 1, Episode 8, The Lord of the Tides, the death of King Viserys, and it might be the most beautiful and the most tragic episode in the entire series. By this point, years later, Viserys is dying, slowly, horribly. He has a wasting illness, leprosy essentially, that has eaten away half his face and his body. He's lost an eye. He can barely walk. He spends his days in a darkened room, drugged on milk of the poppy to manage the pain. He is a ruin of the man he was, and his family is at the edge of open war. the Greens, led by Alicent and her children, against the Blacks, led by Rhaenyra. Viserys is the only thing holding it all together, the only person everyone still somehow respects. There's a dispute at court over who will inherit Driftmark, and Rhaenyra's sons are being publicly called bastards. The Hightowers are circling. Otto Hightower is literally sitting on the Iron Throne, ready to rule in Viserys' absence, and the whole thing is about to tip in the Greens' favor. And then the doors open. Viserys,
As hand I speak with the king's voice on this.
who can barely stand, who has not left his bed in what feels like forever, has dragged himself up, put on his crown and his royal garb and a mask to hide the ruin of his face, and he walks. Slowly, in agony, every step its own small war, the king crosses the entire throne room to defend his daughter. The music that plays during this walk is a triumphant version of the somber theme from episode 1, the very same melody that played during Aemma's death. The show is connecting these two moments across 8 episodes. The wife he lost, and the daughter he's spending the last of his body to protect. He can't quite make it up the steps to the throne, and Daemon, his volatile, difficult brother who has wanted that crown his whole life, quietly steps in. The crown falls from Viserys' head, and Daemon picks it up and gently places it back and helps his brother up to the Iron Throne. It was an accident on set. The crown genuinely fell and the actor improvised catching it. And it became one of the most moving moments in the show, a wordless resolution to a rivalry that started in the very first episode, the man who always wanted the crown putting it back on his brother's head. Viserys defends Rhaenyra. He shuts down the challenge. And that night, he gathers his entire fractured family for one dinner, a scene staged to look like the Last Supper, and he begs them, in the most human terms, to stop fighting, to remember they're a family, and for one fragile evening it almost works. Alicent and Rhaenyra, the estranged best friends, actually soften toward each other. Alicent even tells Rhaenyra she'll make a fine queen. There's a flicker, just a flicker, of a world where this war never happens. And then Viserys dies. And this is the cruelest irony in the entire show. Alone in his bed, drugged and dying, Viserys is tended by Alicent, and he begins to murmur about the Song of Ice and Fire, the prophecy, the secret he shared only with Rhaenyra. He thinks he's talking to Rhaenyra. He's not. He's talking to Alicent, who has no idea this prophecy even exists. He talks about Aegon's dream, meaning Aegon the Conqueror, the founder, who dreamed of the darkness from the north. He talks about the prince who was promised uniting the realm. He says, "You must do it." And Alicent hears the name Aegon, and Alicent has a son named Aegon. And in that moment, this grieving woman believes, sincerely, mistakenly, that her dying husband is telling her with his last breath that he wants their son Aegon to be king instead of Rhaenyra. "I understand, my king," she says. She understands nothing. She has walked into the middle of a conversation about a centuries-old prophecy and mistaken it for a deathbed endorsement of her son. That single misunderstanding lights the fuse on the entire war.
I wish to raise my cup to Her Grace the Queen.
Viserys spent his last day defending Rhaenyra, begging for peace, and his final, drugged, ambiguous words hand his other daughter figure the justification to usurp the throne and doom them all, and then the grace note. After Alicent leaves, we get one last moment with Viserys alone. He reaches into the air, a tear running down his face, and with his final breath he murmurs, "My love." Paddy Considine improvised it. Viserys, in his last second of life, is not thinking like a king. He's reaching for Aemma, the wife he lost in episode 1, the wife he sacrificed, the woman whose death started everything. He dies a husband, reaching for the person he believes has come to carry him out of this life.
And I'm sorry if I have failed you in that I am.
And the screen cuts to black. Paddy Considine's performance across this entire season is one of the great tragic turns in television, and this episode is its summit. Viserys was a flawed, weak, fundamentally decent man who only ever wanted to hold his family together, and he died believing he had. Moments before his last words tore it apart forever. And then 2 episodes later the war truly begins, season 1 finale, the Black Queen, the death of Lucerys Velaryon. Viserys is dead. Aegon has been crowned by the Greens. Rhaenyra, who learns of her father's death and her brother's coronation in the same breath, is so overwhelmed she goes into premature labor and delivers a stillborn daughter. Yet another childbirth tragedy. The third the show has shown us, and this one she has to physically endure while her whole world collapses. The show does not let up. As the two sides scramble for allies, Rhaenyra sends her two eldest sons out as messengers on Dragonback to secure the loyalty of the great houses. Her eldest, Jacaerys, flies north, and her younger son, Lucerys.
But if we are to serve the Seven Kingdoms,
Luke, just 14 years old, sweet, unsure of himself, anxious, flies south to Storm's End on his young dragon Arrax to remind House Baratheon of their oath. Luke arrives in a brutal thunderstorm and his heart sinks because parked outside Storm's End is Vhagar, the largest dragon in the world, which means his uncle Aemond is already there. Aemond, who lost an eye as a child in a fight with Luke and the other boys, and who has hated Luke ever since. Aemond, who now rides the greatest dragon alive. Inside, Lord Boros Baratheon has already pledged to the Greens. He dismisses Luke, but before Luke can leave, Aemond confronts him. He demands Luke give up an eye, payment for the eye Luke took from him all those years ago. He says he means to give it to his mother. Luke refuses. Aemond draws a blade, and only Lord Boros stepping in,
Not in my hall!
refusing to allow bloodshed under his roof, saves Luke in that moment. Luke is escorted back out to his dragon, and then he takes off into the storm. And Aemond follows on Vhagar. What happens next is staged like a horror movie. Luke and little Arrax struggle through the howling wind and rain, this small young dragon buffeted around the sky. And then a shadow, a growl, a flash of lightning illuminating the enormous shape of Vhagar above them, one of the single most terrifying images the show ever produced. Aemond chases them laughing, taunting in High Valyrian, demanding the debt be paid. And here's the crucial thing the show changes from the book. It makes this an accident. Aemond is trying to terrorize Luke, to scare him, but neither boy is an experienced dragon rider, and dragons are not horses. They're wild, intelligent, willful creatures. Arrax, panicking against Luke's screamed commands, breathes fire at Vhagar, and Vhagar, enraged, ignoring Aemond, who is suddenly screaming, "No! Vhagar, no!" turns and snaps her jaws. For one moment, Luke and Arrax burst up through the clouds into clear sky, and the sun is shining, and Luke is panting, and he's okay. He thinks he's okay. And then Vhagar erupts out of the clouds and bites Arrax in half. No music, just the sound of it. The two halves of the little dragon tumble down into the storm, and Lucerys Velaryon is gone in a single second. And Aemond, who only wanted to frighten him, stares in absolute horror at what his dragon has done, because Aemond just became a kinslayer. He killed a child, and it was, in the most agonizing way, an accident that didn't have to happen. Back on Dragonstone, Daemon learns the news, and in a long, dread-filled slow-motion shot, he walks the length of the great painted table to where Rhaenyra stands, and he takes her hand, and he tells her simply that her son is dead. And the episode ends on Rhaenyra's face, turning slowly to the camera, her grief hardening into something cold and final. A mother who has just lost her boy, a queen who will now have her war. The whole season, peace was still possible, there were still off-ramps, but once Rhaenyra's child was slain, there could be no reconciliation. As the source material puts it, the first battles of the dance were fought with quills and ravens until this. Luke's death is the point of no return, and it's made unbearable precisely because it looked like an accident, because two boys playing at a feud unleashed forces neither of them could control. Which brings us to Season 2, Episode 1, A Son for a Son. And the show's answer to the Red Wedding, Rhaenyra is shattered by Luke's death. She flies out alone, in a desperate, grief-mad state, searching the waters off Storm's End until she finds the proof, a scrap of her son's remains, and she breaks down completely, clutching it to her chest. And then she comes back, and she demands one thing: revenge. An eye for an eye, a son for a son. Daemon, who never needs much encouragement toward violence, takes it upon himself. He uses his contacts to hire two men to sneak into the Red Keep and kill Aemond, the one who killed Luke. The two men are known to history only as Blood, a brutal former Goldcloak, and Cheese, a rat catcher who knows the secret tunnels of the castle. And Daemon gives them a target, Aemond, but no real backup plan if they can't find him. They can't find him. And so, inside the Red Keep, desperate to collect their payment and hurt the Hightowers, Blood and Cheese improvise the most monstrous possible alternative. They make their way to the royal chambers, and instead of Aemond, they find Queen Helena, Aegon's sister wife, a gentle, strange young woman with a gift for unsettling prophecy, and her two small children, the twins Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, asleep in their beds. Jaehaerys is 6 years old. He is the king's heir. They hold a knife to Helaena's throat, and they tell her that one of her sons must die, a son for a son. They need her to identify which child is the boy, the heir. She tries to bribe them with her necklace. They take it and refuse. They tell her that if she takes too long, they'll kill all of them. And Helaena, this fragile young mother, in the worst moment of her life, has to point. She has to choose. She points to Jaehaerys. Blood doubts she'd give up the heir so easily, but Cheese believes her. And as the men move to murder her sleeping son, Helaena scoops up her little daughter and runs. We don't see the killing, we hear it, the sound of it, and it's worse than anything they could have shown. Helaena flees down the stairs and bursts into her mother Alicent's chambers, interrupting Alicent in bed with Sir Criston Cole, and she can barely speak. All she can get out, in total shock, are the words, "They killed the boy." It is the show's red wedding, the moment that confirms no one is safe. Not even children asleep in their beds, and the horror ripples outward in every direction. Helena is destroyed. Aegon, the unfit, cruel king, who nonetheless genuinely loved his son and saw himself in the boy, is shattered by it. And Daemon, who set this in motion with a careless order and no plan, has to live with the fact that his thirst for revenge ended with the head of a sleeping child. The cycle of a son for a son doesn't end the grief, it multiplies it endlessly on both sides, and the losses keep coming. Season 2, Episode 4, The Red Dragon and the Gold. The death of Princess Rhaenys. Rhaenys Targaryen, played by Eve Best, is one of the show's most dignified, clear-eyed characters. She was passed over for the throne herself years ago for being a woman. She knows better than anyone the cost of this war, and in this episode, the first true dragon battle of the dance takes place at Rook's Rest.
That is why I must believe.
Rhaenys flies out on her dragon melees, the Red Queen, to break Sir Criston Cole's army. And at first she's winning, burning the green troops, dominating the field. But it's a trap. Aemond is hiding nearby on Vhagar, and when King Aegon foolishly flies in on his own dragon Sunfire to claim the glory, all three dragons collide in the sky. What follows is brutal and chaotic. Aemond in the confusion, and there's a real question of whether he does it on purpose, unleashes Vhagar's fire on the tangle of dragons, badly wounding his own brother Aegon and Sunfire in the process. And Rhaenys, fighting valiantly, lands blows on the monstrous Vhagar. But there is no beating the largest dragon in the world. Vhagar rises from below and catches Meleys by the neck, and crushes it in her jaws. And Rhaenys, still strapped into her saddle, calm, accepting, plummets to her death with her dragon. One of the wisest, most decent people in the entire story. Gone. Eve Best's final appearance, and a death the show treats with enormous gravity. That's House of the Dragon, a show with the most powerful weapons ever imagined, about a family with everything, that destroys itself completely. And the genius of it is that the saddest moments are almost never the battles, they're the quiet human catastrophes. A queen cut open on a table so her husband can have an heir for nothing. A woman commanding her own dragon to burn her rather than die without dignity. A dying king dragging his ruined body across a room to defend his daughter, and then dooming her with his final misheard words. A 14-year-old boy bitten out of the sky in a storm because two children couldn't control the monsters they were riding. A mother forced to point at her own sleeping son. House of the Dragon understood something Game of Thrones understood, that the cruelest tragedies aren't the ones that come from villains. They come from love and grief and misunderstanding, and good people making terrible choices for reasons they think are right. Viserys loved his family and destroyed it. Aemond wanted to scare a boy and murdered him. Daemon wanted to avenge a child and killed another one. Every death sets up the next. Every act of grief becomes an act of violence. A son for a son, forever, until there's almost no one left. The Targaryens believed they were closer to gods than to men, that their dragons made them untouchable. and the whole show is the slow, agonizing proof of how wrong they were. That the fire they thought made them safe was the very thing that burned everything they loved to ash. So, which moment hit you the hardest? Viserys' last walk to the throne, Luke in the storm, Helena's impossible choice? Drop it in the comments, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Dracarys, we'll see you next time.